Lots of guys have won drag racing championships. Don Prudhomme won 4 of them. John Force won 16. Shirley Muldowney won 3, but none of them got called the Godfather of Drag Racing. That title belongs to one guy and one guy only, a self-taught mechanic from the swamps of Florida who built his first race car under an oak tree with an arc welder and an extension cord running from his kitchen stove. A guy the California establishment once dismissed as Don Garbage. A guy who lost half his right foot in an explosion and then used that disaster to save the lives of every Top Fuel driver who came after him. His name is Don Garlits, and by the time this story is over, you'll understand exactly why the entire sport looks to him as its patriarch. To understand what made Garlits different, you first have to understand what drag racing looked like before he came along. In the 1950s, this was a California sport. The hot rod culture, the speed equipment manufacturers, the magazine coverage, the sanctioning bodies, all of it was centered on the West Coast. If you weren't from Southern California, you were an outsider. And the guys running these early dragsters were drivers. They showed up at the track, they climbed in the car, and they went down the strip. The actual building and tuning was done by separate people. The chassis guys built the frames, the engine guys did the motors, the drivers drove. That was the model. And then there was this kid from Tampa, Florida, who didn't know he was supposed to do it that way. Donald Glenn Garlits was born January 14th, 1932, into circumstances that would shape everything about him. His father, Edward, had been a Westinghouse engineer in Pittsburgh who worked on inventing both the electric fan and the electric iron. But when his health failed, the family moved to Tampa. Don's mother later divorced Edward and married Alex Weir, who ran a dairy farm in North Tampa, about 50 head of cattle. And every single morning, Don and his brother got up at 4 a.m. to milk those cows before school, then came home and milked them again after school, 7 days a week. As Garlits put it later, that really puts the work ethic in you. His mother wanted him to be an accountant. He was actually pretty good at it too. Captain of his high school bookkeeping team, and they won a state championship. After graduation, he took an accounting job at Moss Brothers department store in downtown Tampa and lasted exactly 6 months before his stepfather told him something that changed his life. You want to go through life doing something you love, and you love cars. You should go work at a garage. His mother thought car mechanics were grease monkeys, but Don listened to his stepfather. He learned racing mechanics entirely by reading and hands-on experimentation. No formal training, no apprenticeship under a master engine builder, just Hot Rod magazine and whatever he could figure out on his own. By 1954, he was building his first dragster under an oak tree at his home at 706 East 122nd Avenue in North Tampa. Just him with an arc welder and a cutting torch powered by an extension cord from the electric range plug in his kitchen. A 1927 Ford Model T Roadster with a 1948 Mercury engine block. The neighbors had a fit, but that didn't stop him. 2 years earlier, he'd met a pretty brunette named Patricia Beeger while water skiing at Lake Magdalene. It was love at first sight, according to Don. Pat's father was not happy when Don showed up in his hot rod 1940 Ford convertible, so Don immediately traded it for a plain Jane 1950 Ford to win the old man over. They married February 20, 1953, and 1 month later, Pat proved she was going to be his good luck charm when he won his first trophy at Lake Wales, Florida. A little 8-inch plastic thing with an angel perched on top. They would stay married nearly 61 years until her death in 2014. Now here's where the story gets interesting. In November 1957, Garlits became the first guy to break 170 miles per hour, running 176.40 at Brooksville Airport in Florida. The following December, he broke 180, running exactly 180 flat at the same track. These were legitimate world records, but the California crowd dismissed them because they happened in the East. The attitude was basically, that doesn't count because it didn't happen here. So in 1959, Garlits paid $4,500, which would be about $50,000 in today's money, to travel all the way to California for the Bakersfield March meet. This was the big leagues, the toughest Top Fuel race in the country, and he was so suspicious of them California boys that he had speed equipment legend Ed Iskandarian hold his entry money in escrow until he got there. When he showed up, the Bakersfield fans threw beer cans at his crude-looking car. He qualified but destroyed 2 Hemi motors and never made eliminations. The California establishment started calling him Don Garbage. That insult would not last long. By 1963, Garlits won his first NHRA Winter Nationals at Pomona, running 8.26 at 186 miles per hour, the first Nitro Top Fuel win in NHRA history. The following year, on August 1, 1964, at Island Dragway in New Jersey, he became the first driver to officially break 200 miles per hour, running 201.34 in 7.78 seconds. As he explained it later, we had the power to go 200 miles per
mph as far back as 1957, but not the tires. Then, in 1965, came the legendary 12-round dominance at Bakersfield over 2 days. The same track where they jeered him and thrown beer cans was now watching him destroy the entire California contingent. Pretty much shut everybody up after that. But Garlits wasn't just fast, he was smart in ways that separated him from everybody else. While other top drivers showed up and drove cars that other people built, Garlits designed his own chassis, welded his own frames, tuned his own engines, and then climbed in and won. He was the whole operation. He shared technical secrets openly when other races hoarded them. In 1964, Hot Rod magazine ran a feature called Garlits Tells All, where he revealed every speed secret he knew. When editor Ray Brock asked why he was giving away his advantages, Garlits said, "It's no fun seeing a guy in the next lane lose because he blows his engine halfway down the strip." He also refused to compromise his principles, even when he cost him. The Navy once offered him $50,000 to sponsor his car, but they objected to him putting a cross and the words "God is love" on his cowl. He turned down the money. By September 1968, Garlits had broken the 240-mile-per-hour barrier. He was the undisputed king of top fuel. But the cars themselves were still basically the same design they'd been since the beginning of the sport. Engine in front, driver in back, sitting on top of a transmission and clutch assembly that was essentially a bomb waiting to go off. Everybody knew it was dangerous. They just kept doing it anyway, because that's how it had always been done.
And then came March 8, 1970. Lions Drag Strip in Long Beach, California. Final round of an AHRA Grand American Series event. Garlits was in Swamp Rat 13, a front-engine slingshot. Like every other top fuel car on the planet, the 2-speed transmission in that car was a modified Chrysler Torque Flight unit developed by Ed Stoffel of Quartermaster Industries. The transmission drum was made from rolled steel plate that was welded, not solid tube. And when the weld seam failed, the sprag, which is a one-way clutch mechanism, let go, and the engine over-revved beyond 25,000 RPM. The disintegrating transmission cut the car completely in half just in front of the cockpit. Don Prudhomme was right there. His funny car was in the lanes, waiting to run next with the body up because they were about to make their pass. Then there was this big flash. He jumped out of the car, and sure enough, there was Garlits. Car broke in half. Prudhomme thought he was all done. His foot was pretty well cut off. Garlits lost approximately half of his right foot in that explosion. A 17-year-old spectator named Tim Ditt was critically injured by flying debris and nearly lost his arm. When the specialist arrived at Pacific Coast Hospital to treat Garlits, he reportedly insisted the doctor save the boy's arm before treating his own foot. Now, most guys would have been done after something like that, and honestly, nobody would have blamed Garlits if he'd walked away. He was 38 years old. He'd already proven everything there was to prove. He had a wife and 2 daughters at home. He could have retired a legend. Instead, he started sketching a new design while he was still in the hospital. He read an article by E.K. von Delden in the August 1970 issue of Hot Rod magazine called New Concepts in Fuelers. One sentence haunted him. How the driver got behind these components in the first place is an easy question to answer, but what keeps him there isn't. Those 5 words changed everything. But what keeps him there? By June 1970, still on crutches and wearing a cast, Garlits was back behind the wheel of the repaired Swamp Rat 13 at the AHRA Spring Nationals in Bristol. But he was already thinking about something else entirely. He wasn't going to fix the old design. He was going to throw it out and start over. Construction began on Swamp Rat 14 in September 1970. 3 guys built it. Garlits as designer and driver, T.C. Lemons as crew chief, and Connie Swingle as master welder. Swingle completed the chassis in not quite 3 weeks. The concept was simple but radical. Put the engine behind the driver instead of in front of him. That way, if anything exploded, the driver wouldn't be sitting on top of it. Now, rear-engine dragsters weren't a new idea. Other guys had tried them. They just didn't work very well. The handling was terrible. And when Garlits first tested Swamp Rat 14, the problem started immediately. The car couldn't complete a full pass without running off the strip due to steering instability. It was so bad that Garlits started building a backup slingshot called Swamp Rat 15, just in case the whole rear-engine project was a failure. That's when Pat Garlits stepped in. She discovered what he was doing with the backup car and flew into a rage. She demanded they continue with the rear-engine project. No plan B. The breakthrough came from Connie Swingle, who suggested slowing the steering ratio from 6-to-1, which was the slingshot standard, down to 10-to-1, about 20% slower. Combined with an open rear end, meaning no spool or posi differential, this solved the handling issues. On December 27, 1970, they debuted the car publicly at Sunshine Speedway in St. Petersburg, Florida. First pass, 7.01 at 211.92 miles per hour, which was the track record. Second pass, 6.85 at 214.46. The thing worked. In January 1971, Garlits brought the car to Lions Drag Strip, the same track where he'd nearly died less than a year earlier. Don Prudhomme walked around it, looked it over, and said dismissively, "Well, that's one way to get publicity." Other drivers' wives reportedly said, "I pray to God that this thing doesn't work. It is the ugliest dragster I have ever seen." 1 month later, at the NHRA Winter Nationals in Pomona, Garlits qualified ninth in a 32-car field and then marched through the entire tournament. Best performance was 225.36 miles per hour in 6.36 seconds. He beat Kenny Safford in the final. The Los Angeles Times headline the next day said Garlits' car had turned the collective group of slingshots into a $1 million junk pile. Within 18 months, the front-engine slingshot had all but vanished from Top Fuel. Today, every single Top Fuel dragster on the planet follows the rear-engine design that Don Garlits perfected. Every single one. Now, here's what separates Garlits from everybody else who ever strapped into one of these things. He didn't just drive the car that changed the sport. He designed it, he built it, he tuned it, and then he won with it. In his own words, I didn't invent the rear-engine dragster. I just perfected it, and he wasn't done. In 1972, Garlits organized the drivers and formed something called Pro, which stood for Professional Racers. The issue was simple. The purses were terrible. Top Fuel drivers were risking their lives for almost nothing. NHRA founder Wally Parks insisted it would be light years before the U.S. Nationals paid $25,000 to win. Garlits scheduled a pro race in Tulsa on Labor Day weekend, directly opposite the NHRA U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis. The pro race paid $25,000. Most of the top professionals showed up in Tulsa instead of Indy. NHRA immediately tripled its Top Fuel purse. As Garlits put it, I was just sick and tired of the low purses. The pro helped the purses. It changed the whole sport. But Wally Parks never forgave him for it. The records kept falling. October 1975. Garlits became the first to break 250 miles per hour, running 250.69 in 5.63 seconds at Ontario Motor Speedway. That record stood for 7 years. In 1984, he came out of retirement and won the U.S. Nationals, which helped save the Top Fuel class that was declining in car count and popularity at the time. He won 3 consecutive U.S. Nationals in 1984, 1985, and 1986, plus back-to-back NHRA championships in 1985 and 1986. He was in his mid-50s.
March 1986, he became the first to break 270 miles per hour, running 271.08 at the Gator Nationals in a fully streamlined car called Swamp Rat 3 Roman numerals.
Defeating Shirley Muldowney was an accomplishment in itself. Now he is racing against the crowd favorite as Herb Parks makes sure that canopy is closed tightly over Big Daddy Don Garlits. He approaches the starting line. Garlits has the whole shot. Pastorini is right alongside of him. Garlits to the finish line and moves into the final. And Don Garlits sets 272 miles an hour as the fastest speed ever on a drag strip. The crowd goes crazy. In addition, Garlits runs a 5.40 second elapsed time.
The following year, that car was enshrined in the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History, the first drag racing vehicle ever to receive that honor. It's displayed near Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis and NASA's first manned space capsule. But championships and speed records weren't enough for Garlits. In 1984, he opened the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida, a 25,000-square-foot facility housing nearly 300 vehicles, including every swamp rat he ever built, except the one in the Smithsonian. He didn't just want to preserve his own legacy, he wanted to preserve the entire history of the sport. The museum also houses the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, which Don and Pat founded in 1990. And then there's the mentoring. Josh Hart, who currently drives Top Fuel in NHRA, considers Garlits a mentor and a friend. They worked together on Garlits' electric dragster project. That's right, at 87 years old, Garlits set the quarter-mile EV record at 189 miles per hour, still chasing speed barriers. Here's the thing that answers the question we started with. Why is Don Garlits the godfather of drag racing when other guys also won championships? Don Prudhomme put it best in 2025 when he said, "If ever I'm gone, I want to tell you who was the greatest drag racer of all time, Don Garlits." The things he did to change the sport and save lives with the rear-engine car is pretty amazing. He's still the Big Daddy, the most amazing drag racer I've ever seen in my life. Shirley Muldowney was a great driver, one of the best ever, but she was just a driver. She didn't build her cars, she didn't tune her engines, she didn't organize the drivers to fight for better pay. She didn't build a museum to preserve the sport's history. Don Prudhomme was a great driver, 4 championships, but he had crew chiefs and engine builders and chassis guys doing the work. He drove what they built. John Force is a legend, 16 championships, but same story. Team owner, yes. Driver, yes. But he's not the guy under the car with a wrench figuring out how to make it faster. Garlits did all of it. He was the mechanic, the engineer, the innovator, the competitor, the advocate, and the historian. He built the cars, he tuned the motors, he drove to victory. He revolutionized safety after nearly dying. He fought for driver pay when nobody else would. He mentored the next generation. He preserved the sport's history. As one old-timer put it, his contribution to the sport dwarfs anybody else's because he did it all. Richard Parks, the son of NHRA founder Wally Parks, described Garlits this way. Like Napoleon, who grabbed the crown of France and placed it on his head, Don was going to take drag racing and make it his regal domain. A tough kid from the swamps of Florida was going to rule drag racing, and he didn't need anyone to put the crown on his head. He would do that himself by taking it by force. As of early 2025, Don Garlits is still alive at 93 years old. He lives next door to his museum in Ocala with his second wife, Lisa, whom he married in 2015. He still shows up at events. In April 2025, he presented the trophy to the 1000th NHRA Top Fuel winner at Charlotte. The guy who built his first race car under an oak tree with an extension cord from his kitchen stove is still there, 7 decades later, still the benchmark against which all others are measured. 17 world championships, 144 national event wins, first to break 170, 180, 200, 240, 250, 260, and 270 miles per hour. Creator of the rear engine design that every top fuel dragster uses today, and when Prudhomme talks about him, he still sounds like he's describing a superhero. I remember we were at some race together and it was really hot, and we weren't supposed to run until night. I looked out the window of my hotel room, and there he was, working on his car in the parking lot, sweating like a pig. He was out there with a hacksaw, sawing the bottom frame rails to take a piece out of it. That's how badly he always wanted to win. That's why he's the Godfather. Not because he won more than everybody else, although he did. Not because he went faster than everybody else, although he did that too. But because he built the sport with his own hands and his own mind, and his relentless refusal to accept things the way they were. When the California crowd called him Don Garbage, he came back and beat them on their own turf. When a transmission blew him in half, he redesigned the entire car and saved countless lives in the process. When the sanctioning bodies refused to pay drivers fairly, he organized them and forced change. When he was done racing, he built a museum so none of it would be forgotten. Don Garlits didn't just race dragsters, he defined what drag racing is, and that's why there's only one Godfather.